Hi, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to my fellow Philadelphia citizens. I'm Larry Platt of the Philadelphia Citizen. And before we get to our special guest, Rebecca Rhynhart, the City Controller, our city's fiscal watchdog, I want to run through a couple of issues about how the night's going to go and so forth. First of all, let me say I've been looking forward to this all day, and not just because it was an opportunity to shower and get out of my pajamas, but also because this is extremely timely. We've had the mayor redo the budget in this time of crisis, and I can't think of anyone more well-versed to talk to about this moment in Philadelphia history. So we're going to get to that discussion pretty quickly. First, let me just explain a couple things about how this will go down. I want to thank our partner, the Fittler Club, which I miss dearly. I can't wait to get back there. And I also want to just give you a heads up to be patient with our technology. This is our fourth town hall meeting. Two were flawless. One we had a little bit of technical difficulty with, and so we're hoping to master the technology, and our fingers are crossed tonight. So, but please bear with us. So Rebecca and I are going to talk for 20, 30 minutes, and then we're going to open it to all of you to weigh in. You'll see at the bottom of your screen, ask a question. You can put a question, write a question in there. We'd love for you to join us on the screen, a real town hall. If you can indicate in your question that you'd be willing to do this, our master technician, Shodman, who's Oz behind the scenes here, will get you up to the screen, and we'll have a dialogue. And it's actually pretty cool when someone suddenly appears and you can have this discussion. Before we begin, I also want to just plug some of our upcoming events. Next week, we have a book club event on Tuesday in partnership with Head House Books, and that's with local author Liz Moore, whose latest novel is critically acclaimed all over the place. Looking forward to that. And on Wednesday, along with partner Fittler Club, we'll be talking with my buddy Mike Tolan. Mike Tolan is the producer behind the show that everyone's watching right now, The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan documentary. And Mike's going to take us behind the scenes, the 5-year odyssey to get that production on the air. And also, he'll talk about his entire career, how Philly has informed it, how his Philadelphia philanthropy is really his soul, and he's a for a Hollywood guy, a real spiritual guy. I think that'll be interesting to a lot of people. And finally, we'll be back here on May 18th for another political discussion, political and current events discussion with our Attorney General, Josh Shapiro. So with all that, let's get to our city controller. And Rebecca, before we begin, behind you, I love these because, you know, it reveals something.
Yeah.
Who's the dog?
Oh, this is a portrait. Yeah. Can you see it?
Yeah.
My dog, that's Banjo, my dog. Yeah, we got a portrait. Someone gave us a portrait of our dog for the holidays. So, yeah. Well, and that's a piece of artwork that a friend of mine made. So
I got a chance to see Banjo earlier, and he's adorable and seemed really laid back.
Yeah, he's he's a chill hound dog until he's not chill anymore. But yeah.
All right. Well, let's dive in. I mentioned the budget, and you and your office is out just this week with a really cool budget tool that enables the citizen to interactively see where the money goes in the new budget proposal from the mayor. I'd love to just show that, if we can get it up on the screen. There it is. I don't know if you guys can see it. Okay, here we go. Yeah. And if we can show, if you can click on some of these bubbles here in the budget, if you go down a little bit, is the cursor moving? Yeah, there we go. Oh, maybe here we go. Okay. So, yeah, I don't.
Can you click on the bubbles?
Shaman, are you able to click on the bubbles? Well, there's one, right? Okay. Yeah. Budget stabilization reserve. What are we looking at here when you click on these bubbles?
So what this is a visualization of the mayor's revised proposed fiscal 21 budget. And for example, when we're looking at the bubbles, we're looking at the percent change between what the mayor proposed last Friday and what he had proposed earlier. So budget stabilization reserve, that's just there was 36 million budgeted to be deposited into that. Now there's not. Now if you move the cursor, I don't know if someone can move it, but around any of the darker red bubbles are the biggest cuts. And then the lighter red bubbles have a lower level of cuts. So, yep, you can, if you go into sort of the deeper red ones, you can see like what is cut more. So what we wanted to do with this was just make it more accessible to the public. What exactly was being proposed, what was being cut, what was having the biggest cuts, so that people could be more involved in the process, because I think too often there's not enough transparency around city finances. So that's what we were trying to do with this. And you can see right now, if you just stop right there, oh, you were on arts and culture. Yep, yeah, there you go. So this is a good example, arts, culture, and creative economy. This is 3.4 million that's been budgeted for years and years to give us small grants to community arts organizations. And in the mayor's proposed budget from a few days ago, he zeroed that out, which is pretty severe, obviously. So this just makes it more accessible.
Great, that's perfect. We can come back now, Shaman, to the, yeah, that's great. Thank you. I spent hours looking at it, and it was fun because it's like,
yeah,
like we all are. We're surprised when things work, when technology works seamlessly. So it was cool, but it also made me think, like, why is our city controller more transparent about the mayor's budget than the administration itself? Isn't this something that it's sort of unfortunate that you've had to do this? And how do you do it? Like, how did you decide to do this?
Yeah, so basically, since I came to office, this is a push and a belief that I have that government should be more transparent. And there's no reason why we shouldn't be. Other cities are really open with their data and their technology, using technology to get information out. So what we do is, I mean, I have two people, actually, a great two people, but two people in my office that are focused on finance policy and analysis, and also data visualization. So things that we believe are important to the people, we synthesize and release that in a data format. So we did it for soda tax. We did it for paving and potholes. Basically, the things that people really want to know about, we'll put out in terms of just a data release. And it would be great if the mayor and administration we're as into it. But for now, I'm happy to lead that charge. So
no, I think it's great. The more information, look, sunlight is the best disinfectant. We know that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So kudos. I thought that was really cool, and I wanted that, which is why I wanted to begin with it. But let's talk about the budget, because you've in your role as fiscal watchdog, you dove in, and I'd like to get your take on what you found. First of all, you said that you do this weird, like, almost like beautiful brain, like, spreadsheet.
I'm sorry I told you this now, Larry. No, it's not. It just, I think through working in Excel spreadsheets, which until I said that out loud didn't seem that weird, but now seems very weird. So what I do is, I sort of put the numbers into an Excel spreadsheet, for example, the budget, and then I sort of think through Excel. Like I think, and then I play with the numbers, and then I move, I think through where the budget should go, or what could be cut, where efficiencies are. I just think through in a spreadsheet. So then my staff get these weird spreadsheets from me.
I'm not saying that to embarrass you or to make fun of it. I think you want a controller who thinks in terms of spreadsheets. Like that's, it seems to me like that's so. But
I appreciate that.
But tell me what you found as you dove in. Is there a theme here? Is there a strategy?
Well, I mean, I think that the city's budget has increased by a lot, as you know, over the last 5 years. It's gone up by over $1 billion, which is a lot. I mean, in 2 years alone, from fiscal 17 to fiscal 19, the budget went up by 15%. When, if you look at those 2 years together, inflation only increased by 3%. So we've had really significant increases in spending. So that's sort of the backdrop that I think is important to keep in mind through this. And then I think that the budget that the mayor has proposed, look, I mean, first I'll just say it's a really hard situation, right? We're in an unprecedented environment. The decline in tax revenues is severe. This is something that we haven't faced before. So this is hard. So I want to just make sure that that's clear. But I also think that there are ways to manage through it that are more thoughtful, in the sense of there are ways to manage through it without tax increases, I believe, and without severe cuts to services. But it'll take some management and leadership through efficiencies. And I mean, I can get into that more if you want, but I think that overall, I think there is a way forward that is not easy, but is more sort of more visionary to push forward and say, okay, let's use this crisis as an opportunity to run the city better, so that's what I think. And
I was surprised at the it's sort of well accepted that you don't raise taxes as you're about to be enmeshed in a depression. Hopefully that's not the case, but things are bad, as you said. So, and I was struck by, just today I saw that Detroit has cut 16% of its budget, no tax increases. It made the hard choices. Were you surprised that there are tax increases being asked for by the mayor?
I was disappointed. I guess I would say more than surprised. I think it's solvable. Like, for example, in the city's budget, the mayor proposed raising the commuter wage tax and the parking tax and a few other things. Those taxes in the city's budget equal to about 50 million. And that is solvable in other ways. For example, even better managing overtime could save over $40 million a year. And that's a number that we've come to through looking at overtime per employee adjusted by inflation. And this gets very sort of, wonky and detailed. So I don't want to bore anyone, but if we look at inflation per employee, it's gone up from 6,000 to 8,000, adjusted for inflation since fiscal 11. So that's just a lack of really overseeing that over time, and that would be easily over 40 million. That's a really low estimate. If we could just get an overtime czar and get that under control. So there's opportunities. They're not easy, but there are opportunities to not hit the people again.
Well, and on the question of overtime, you had a previous report that showed something that really caught my eye, which was that we've added 1,000 full-time workers at the same time that overtime went up, which says what?
Okay, that's not a good thing in running a city. So what the general concept is that if you add employees into a department's operations, you should expect overtime to decline, right? That overtime is used as a temporary stopgap when you don't have enough employees. So when you see a trend that's happened in multiple departments at the city where you increase full-time staffing and you also increase overtime, that is a lack of management. That's basically like every employee that gets hired, oh, they need some overtime too. So it's like, oh, you're new and how much overtime do you need? Okay. Like that's just not the way it should be. So that's when you really say there's a problem. I mean, of course there are unique circumstances, events or crises that can change that, but generally that should not be the case.
You also mentioned the proposal to increase taxes by 50%, or by 50 million. But I just heard today, I thought that was it. That's not it. Am I right? There's this other that doesn't include property tax increase, which is supposedly on the way. Is that right? Explain this to me.
Yeah, this is something that is not being done in really as concerted an effort as I want to see, because what we have is the mayor proposed the city's revised budget, and that had the 50 million in tax increases, as you mentioned. But what it didn't solve for is the school district's budget hole. And the school district has its own hole, and they will be coming to city council, and they will need to fill that hole. And that hole is about 60 million.
And and that's relevant because we now have control of the school. It's not the state anymore. We took local control of the schools.
Well, we did. I mean, it's always been the district has always had to go to city council to get its taxes approved. But I think that now that the School Reform Commission, as you mentioned, has been abolished and the mayor has more control over it, I think from my perspective, there would be more of an emphasis, I would think, on doing sort of a budget assessment of both together and saying, okay, what do we need? Because both are going to be burdens on the taxpayer, right? The city's budget and the school district's budget, and both sort of move together in terms of needing to be solved. So the school district has a budget hole that was mentioned in one newspaper article, that there would be a request for close to a 4% property tax increase on top of the other taxes. So I think that we need to figure out a way to not raise taxes. And I think we can. I mean, it's a solvable number. If you look at the 60 so million that the school district needs, the 50 million that is in the city's budget, 110, 115 million, it's solvable. I'm not saying it's easy, but it is solvable.
Before we get any further, since we're in your living room, I think it's your living room, right? And we're calling these living room chats. I also want to get to a little bit of like who you are.
Okay.
You grew up in Abington, and I'm an investigative reporter. So my understanding is that you were Becky Rhynhart
Oh my God, I can't believe you're telling everyone this.
It was Becky at that point, right?
Oh my God, you did not clear that with me. Yes, it was. Yes, I was Becky. Yes.
And tell us how you ended up, because you unlike so many in city government, you came from the private sector. How did Becky from Abington get here?
Okay, so it's interesting because I went to Columbia for grad school, and then stayed up in New York and actually worked in the private sector. So I worked for Fitch Ratings, and then I worked for Bear Stearns. I was a managing director at Bear. I covered municipal derivatives. And there's definitely things I liked about working at Bear and working on Wall Street, but I also saw really just how governments didn't really understand what they were doing with Wall Street. And I said that because I worked on the trades between Wall Street and local governments, and I just really started to feel like, you know what, local governments need people that understand finance, that understand business, and that can help governments make better decisions for taxpayers. So that's what led me, and I left Bear before it collapsed. Not far before, but before. But that's what led me to join Michael Nutter's administration as city treasurer. So I just said, you know what, I'm going to go back to Philly. I feel a really strong connection to the city. I love the city, and I'm going to come back and try to make this change from the inside, from appointed positions, working for a mayor. So, I worked for the city for 9 years, actually.
Right. And then I flash back on you after your period of time with Mayor Nutter. You were in the Kenney administration the first year. Yeah. And I remember running into you at Pennsylvania Society and you telling me that you're going to run for controller. Mm-hmm. And I thought, oh, poor Rebecca, what is she doing? And I got the sense then that your experience on the inside led you to believe that you had to run for office. Like you haven't always wanted to run for.
No, I never thought I would run for office. I thought I would be sort of a behind the scenes person inside the government. What I saw was that there's so many good people, really good people that work for the city, all over the city, like hardworking people. But there were things that weren't touched financially, contracts that were given, or parts of the budget that, oh, don't touch that because that's connected to X or Y. And so that's connected to this person. And I just started to feel like if I really wanted to change how government works, if I left the private sector to come work for the city of Philly, to change how it works, to make it work for people, and to make it work better for taxpayers, if I can't accomplish that working for a mayor, and nothing against, I work for 2 mayors and I like them both when I work for them. But if I can't accomplish that working for a mayor, then I need to do something differently. And I said, you know what? I have to become an elected official, because that's the only way that I can break through this entrenchment and make the change that I think needs to happen. So a lot of people thought I was crazy.
I wasn't alone.
I would win. People didn't think I would win. So, right. but I did. So people want to change.
Well, and how are you coming on the project of making change? Because I get the sense that if there's a theme to your tenure so far, it's been sort of trying to get the government to move. It's like turning a tanker, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's not like I had this idealistic vision, I think, when I came into office, that I would, through the audit function, I would find things that were wrong, and then with city operations, and I would make recommendations, and then the mayor would implement them, and together, we would improve the city. And it hasn't worked that way. I mean, there are times, for example, with the departmental audit, my audit does every year, where there's been issues in the departments, where department commissioners have come to see me, and they've actually worked out a plan to fix some of their issues, and that's been done, and that's great. But on some of the bigger things, it's been a lot of pushback. And the more pushback I get, the more I think, you know what, there's a reason why they're fighting so hard against it. It's because it needs to be changed. And it just really just strengthens my resolve. Okay, we just have to keep pushing. Eventually, it will change. It will. I'm convinced of that.
So yeah, the script usually is you reveal something or a report or starting with a couple years ago when the $33 million was missing,
Mm-hmm.
and then there was almost $1 billion of irregularities, and I think there were 7 accounts that had not been reconciled for 7 years or something, and you revealed that, and there were personal attacks aimed at you.
Mm-hmm.
You were grandstanding. You were just seeking attention. That was what the mayor spokesman said just recently about your comments about the budget. Did that surprise you at the time? And what is the effect? Does it make you double down on the pursuit of change?
I mean, to me, I am anyone who knows me knows how detail oriented and how thorough I look at everything, right? So people that work for me know that I'm going to ask a million questions about anything they bring to me. So once I've gone public with something, it's pretty well thought out. I think the personal tax, at first I was thrown off by them, but I was new to politics, right? I mean, I knew government, but politics was new. And so I sort of, was thrown off by it, but I got my footing. And I think that whenever I get a personal attack, she's this, she's that, she doesn't know what she's talking about, she's grandstanding. To me, it's like, okay, that means that they can't actually debate on the issue because I'm right. So they're going to attack me because they can't attack the actual issue. And so to me, it just says, okay, like they can attack me, and I'll stick with the issue and keep pushing forward on the issue. Because change does happen. It's just been slower than I would want. Right.
Right. And a perfect example is you did a really good job of elucidating the broken sexual harassment policies of the city.
Right.
The mayor was with you, but then your reforms never actually happened, or most of them never actually happened. So it's like even when there's initial agreement, at least stuff just gets slow walked and disappears or doesn't happen. That's got to be frustrating.
It is. I mean, that it is frustrating, and that the sexual misconduct audit, which the financial angle was to look at the payouts that the city's made, especially to people that we were looking at repeat offenders and large payouts to certain people that were still on the payroll to settle sexual misconduct claims. But then it got into, the problems with how the city handles sexual misconduct claims and the whole process. I think it is frustrating. And I think with that, the mayor did come out and say at the beginning, we had a joint press conference, and he did say he would implement the 2 most important recommendations there: centralization of the investigations and the complaints. Right now, there's many different departments that are handling it. They're starting to work towards centralization, but it's a lot slower than I would want. And to me, it's like, I can see how something can change, right? It's like you need to just look at it so differently and disrupt it and say, okay, we need to get from point A to point Z. Okay, that's how much change we need. So then we can just make steps towards that. make a timeline, set deadlines, and do it, and like work through it. But not everyone thinks that way. Not everyone is like wants to change things. Like, to me, change it's healthy. It feels good when it's positive, but not everyone feels that way. And I don't think the mayor feels that way, I just don't think that change is like that. That's positive, feels positive. So anyway, so that's, I just keep pushing along.
Well, and you're in a tough spot, because I also have heard criticism from you from the other side, which is I had a recent conversation with a bold-faced name in civics and politics who said, "Where is Rebecca? I like Rebecca, but someone needs to stand up to this. Where's her budget? So there's also criticism that you're not reforming enough fast enough. What do you say to that?"
I mean, look, I think that people are going to have their opinions. I mean, this is the future of our city. People are going to have strong opinions about it. And, I've gotten those calls too lately. Like, hey, are you we need, can you push forward? And, look, I'm not a perfect person, right? So I don't even mind when people have criticism or constructive criticism of, can you do X or Y? Because I can grow too, So to me, I'm like, look, I'm doing the best I can do. And every day I think, what can I do and push forward, and not be afraid of anything. Right. I think that's sort of my guiding principle is the people elected me. I answer to the people, and, so move forward. But yeah, people are always going to have their opinions, and they should, right? They should. So.
Absolutely. That's a great answer, I think. Let's go to some questions here. Have people said whether they'd come up to the screen? Well, let me ask a question here is, will you testify before City Council to present your alternatives to the proposed tax increases? How will these options be considered?
That's a good question. I think that I am looking through right now the mayor's proposed budget, and there's certain things that I have identified. I did communicate with the mayor before, or through a letter, because he won't talk to me, but that's a whole nother thing. Some different ideas about balancing the budget. In addition to overtime, every department, I believe, can take a 5% cut. Some departments, the mayor's cut much more than that, but some departments haven't gotten a 5% cut. And after years and years of increases, every department can handle themselves, find efficiencies, reduce some wasteful spending. And I think that that is absolutely doable. And so 5% reduction across every department, including public safety, is about $135 million. So the mayor hasn't taken every department. So right now what I'm doing is going through, looking for specific ways to balance it. But I think eventually I will make these ideas public. There will be some sort of formalization of that. And I don't know if it's in front of City Council or just to be released to the public over the next few weeks. But I think definitely I'll release it, because I think that there should be alternatives, and it should be part of a dialogue.
Yeah, that's a good point. You have a bully pulpit. You're a citywide elected official. You could just hold a press conference and say, "This is what I think," and
right.
and media will show up. By the way, you said that the mayor doesn't speak to me. Is that actually literally true?
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, I mean, I'm not. Yeah, that is. Yeah,
that sounds like playgroundish.
Yeah, it is what it is. I mean, I've tried. So, but anyway, let's get back to. I mean, I think that there are definitely ways. I think that if we really were to say, as a city government, you know what, let's bring in some great minds and let's look at how we can do things better. There's a lot of old processes. There's a lot of things where the general operations of the city could work better. I mean, we could turn the crisis into an opportunity. I mean, there is a way to do that. I mean, I know that there are people that are in different positions, you know, in the city, across the city. I mean, I think we need to look at everything. I mean, really, what we need to do eventually is look at everything the city does through like a program analysis. You can call it zero-based budgeting. I know you've written about that, Larry, but there's so much that needs to be looked at in terms of what is really working and what isn't, to sort of cancel the things, terminate the things that aren't working, and move it to programs that do work. So there are a lot. I think we need to get through this budget, the fiscal 21 budget, and I think we can. And then once we get through that, I think that there is a real opportunity to just transform the city.
Let's be joined by, is it Stephanie? Can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Welcome, Stephanie.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks
So Rebecca, I'm a former city controller employee myself.
Okay, great.
And I left to help my husband run a small business.
Okay.
And I was quite alarmed when I saw the mayor indicate that he was going to increase the non-resident tax, wage tax. And our virtual world seems to be working quite well. And my question to you is, have you had any consideration what the bigger companies who had the technology to allow their employees to work remotely, what if they chose to permanently made them workers from home, and that would decrease our non-resident tax rate? And what is going to happen there? Have you thought about that? Because my concern is that it would fall, the deficit would fall on the small businesses that call Philadelphia home, which I am one of them. I'm one of those small business owners who call Philadelphia home, and I don't want to shoulder that burden.
Right. I mean, I think that's a really good point. I think that the idea of raising the commuter wage tax does not make sense to me. And I think it's solvable. The $15 to $20 million that it would bring in is solvable through other ways, through efficiencies in the city. And I don't think that's the way to go. I think it is short-sighted. And I think that what we need to do is create an environment where businesses want to be in our city, and people aren't disincentivized, if that's the right way to say it, to commute into our city. So I share your concern, and I think that we need to be thinking a lot more about tax structure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thanks so much. So another question that I just saw up here is, aside from the overtime costs you mentioned, what are the other opportunities for efficiencies?
Mm-hmm. I think that there are a lot of, in addition to when I say just that each department can take a cut, for example, even my own controller's office, we took a 5.5% cut, offered it up through this budget process, and that won't impact our service. That's just about, we looked at it and reconfigured some things and delayed some positions. So I think that's possible. I also think there's a lot within each city department that hasn't been looked at in a long time. So for example, when I became controller, I was still getting, in January 2018, I was still getting these pieces of paper all the time, these signature cards. Whenever anyone wanted to change a person on an account anywhere in the city government, in any department, they had to send these cards into me for my signature, and then I had to sign 3 different colors, a red, a yellow, and a green piece of cardboard. And then this was January 2018, and I said, why don't we have DocuSign? Like, or any, I don't mean to say that a specific company, but why aren't we doing electronic signature? Like, this is ridiculous. And so, so we changed. We do it electronically now. We do it through DocuSign, but there are processes within departments that where departments are perhaps taking a piece of paper with someone's signature and having someone drive it to a city office for another person's signature. I'm not kidding. And I'm giving these little examples because there is a lot of opportunity if the operations were looked at in a way for using people that have expertise in business, using people that have expertise in certain industries, and saying, what are we doing here? You know, I mean, because if you have the same people in the room all the time that come from government and work in government all the time, nothing against them, they're wonderful people, but they're not going to know, oh, well, we could change this, we could change that. So that's an example. I think you know, there's a lot of contracts that have been outstanding for years and years and years that probably need to be looked at. We probably need to look at our real estate. We probably need to look at a lot of different things. And that's sort of, there's a lot of opportunity is what I'm saying. I don't know if that answered the question, but there's a lot.
You reminded me of something that we've reported numerous times, which is that I believe you would know how many departments, but certainly the finance department is using like Lotus 123
Yes.
software,
Yes.
which is the forerunner to like Excel, right?
It was. Yes. So they're still doing some documents. You know, they've they've made a little progress. They've taken some documents off of Lotus 123, but they're still using some. That's right. It's the precursor to Excel. And that's the type of thing that it's like, you know, the city you know, there's a lot that needs to change and that can change. And then there's there's just a lot that needs to change.
Let's go to Michael Adler, who is comes to all our events. Michael, it's good to see you.
Good to see you too, Larry.
What's on your mind?
My question is about the Board of City Trusts, Rebecca, and I'm not sure this even falls under your purview. As I've looked around what I think is kind of what's going on in Philadelphia, my understanding is the Board of City Trust has lots of assets that have been bequeathed to the city over the year, like Stephen Girard's estate and the Will's Eye estate and 150 other sundry trusts. But there's billions of assets that are managed, including Girard College, Will's Eye, and other buildings like most of Market Street building. But unlike most things in city council, this is not subject to budgets, reviews, or anything. It's kind of managed by Court of Common Pleas judges and the board. It's not even subject to IRS review because it's not a 990. They don't have to publish their thought. It's an exemption. There's only one other city that has it like this, is New Orleans. So It's kind of one of these things that I've always thought is endemic of a lot of the things going on in city. Look at the power who's on that board and how many assets are on that board.
Okay.
You know, and what can we do to allow transparency, or what is within your role? Do you have oversight over that? And what can be done to just more transparency? Because I love the stuff we saw earlier with your budget visualization.
Okay, no, that's actually a very good question. And I don't, probably speaking to the fact that there isn't a lot of knowledge or transparency around that, I don't have a good handle on Board of City Trust. So I will tonight. Okay.
No worries.
I think that is something that's you know, I could definitely look into. And I think no, I mean, but it speaks to this thing. There's the city has so many assets, and there has been a move, especially in sort of Northern European cities, to really understanding more the assets that they hold, to making sure that they are getting everything they should from their real estate assets. And that's something that we haven't done yet. So, but I'll definitely look at that.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Michael. There's a question here that is related to a issue I've been thinking a lot about lately. Do you think it makes sense to reduce commerce by so much, the Commerce Department by so much, given that businesses will need supports coming out of this stay-at-home order and crisis. And I've been thinking about the fact that we already have the worst poverty in the nation. How do we deal with the effects? We know that the effects of this crisis disproportionately affect those who are already marginalized. That 25% poverty rate will no doubt go up now as you know, people in the middle income slide back. What can we do from a policy standpoint and from a fiscal standpoint? Is it related to this Commerce Department question, or are there other things we should be looking at?
Well, I think that there were a few cuts that really stood out in the proposal, the mayor's proposal, that were like, oh, like that seems, I don't know if that is the best thing, right? So one of them is commerce. Commerce getting decimated by this budget proposal. And sort of the thought process, at least the one that was written in the mayor's 5-year plan, says it's because businesses are getting 10 times more support than local governments from the CARES Act and federal government. They're getting more support, so the city can reduce its support through commerce. And to me, that doesn't make sense. I mean, we're all in this together, and that cut seems too draconian. The Office of Workforce Development was also completely eliminated, which doesn't help in terms of poverty and getting people into the workforce and getting people into permanent employment. So there are certain cuts, in addition to the tax increases. I think there are certain cuts, and also to arts and culture, that are so severe as to not be moving us forward in the way that we should be moving forward as a city. And so I think that as I'm looking through the budget, looking at, okay, how do we solve for not having tax increases and also not having such draconian cuts into these specific areas, commerce, workforce development, the arts and culture. I mean, that doesn't make sense to me. And, you know, I'm in my financial lane, but at the same time, it all gets interconnected, right? The future of our city gets connected to the finances of our city. And I care. So, you know, I think, you know, we need to be able to look at it in a way that is long-term, even though the crisis feels short-term.
Well, that's right, because this was a thing that happened to us, right? So yeah. There's going to be an end at some point, and you want to position yourself as smartly as possible for growth when it's possible to grow. Let's go to Mike. Hey, Mike, can you hear us? Oh, you got to unmute. I think you have to unmute. If you, at the top of the screen, if you toggle. No, you're not unmuting. All right, we'll come back to Mike.
I will say, Larry, while we're while the next person, we're waiting for the next person to come up, that as you mentioned, this is, you know, a public health issue, the pandemic, so it will end at some point, and we need to be able to manage through so that at the other end, we are still a vibrant, strong city. And the other thing that hasn't been talked about much is the federal government's municipal liquidity facility, which is being offered to cities. It started being offered to cities with population greater than 1 million, which made Philly one of the very few cities eligible. And now it's been expanded to have more cities. But what it does is it enables cities to borrow from the Treasury for up to 20% of its lost revenues to be due within 3 years. So I think that also should be looked at in some measured, reasonable way, instead of, raising taxes. Once you raise taxes, it's very hard to get them down. We all know that. So I think raising taxes should be the last resort to go to.
And that federal borrowing is not it's not a prerequisite that those funds be used to fight the pandemic.
No. There's two different programs that the federal government's offering to local governments. One is the reimbursement for the unplanned COVID expenses, which we are taking advantage of. And the other one is to borrow for some portion of lost revenue.
And that's not taken into consideration in the
No.
Kenney budget.
No, it is not. Mm-mm. Yeah, so that's something that's interesting and I think worth exploring because it is a tool. I mean, obviously we couldn't borrow too much because you want to be responsible, fiscally responsible, but it should be looked at, absolutely.
There's a question on here that I'd like to get. I'll read to you. Can you speak to the oversight you provide over council and its members? Seems like there are questionable practices occurring, and it's unclear who checks on them. Are you a check on council?
So my office is the audit function over the mayor, as well as, the mayor, the departments that report to the mayor, as well as city council, the DA, sheriff. So we do audits. We audit, we do a departmental audit every year, which looks at very, very standardized things related to city council. We do have an audit going on right now of the Germantown Special Services District. So we do look at things, and we have an audit going on right now of the sheriff's office of their accounts, custodial sheriff sale accounts. So we do look at things, but there's some oversight, financial oversight.
A long ongoing pet peeve of mine vis-a-vis council. It's a small matter, I guess, but there is a part of its budget that is not transparent. It's a $3 million, I think it's called personal services line item that is not delineated. So I might call you to find out what's in that at some point.
Yeah. So but that does get to the concept of if the city released all of its spending in a way that is usable, like New York City's checkbook, that question would be answered along with every other question we had about what the city's spending on. So that's something that is on my list to do. I was hoping it would come out of the administration. They did like a data release of expenditures, but it was 2 years old and not usable really. So it wasn't like, what New York City does is it updates regularly. So you can actually see like what checks are cut last week, which is amazing. And there's no reason why we can't do that. So that would get to the question about city council, get to questions about everything. Yeah.
Wow. That's a great point. And I think that's something that that we ought to look into, the New York transparency on that. That might be an ideas we should steal.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a great one.
I think Shaban's might be trying to get a couple more, or at least one more questioner up here. If there's anybody who wants to come, here's a question on here that I think is interesting. What can we learn from Rendell's budget cuts? It was, I'm old enough to remember when the city was in fiscal crisis, and it wasn't a pandemic that caused it. It was years of dysfunction and irresponsibility. And in the 90s, some things were done. I know you've talked about a couple of them. I forget the name of the program that you talked about. The
Productivity Bank.
Productivity Bank. Yeah.
Yes. The Productivity Bank was sort of a loan that David Cohen and Mayor Rendell at the time set up. Basically, if departments had innovative ideas where they needed an investment, but they would get a return on it like a year or two down the road, they could actually go pitch pitch them to get the money into their budget, and then they'd have to return the interest, and then it would be loaned out to a different department. I mean, it's a great idea. It's great. Something like that would be great to add on now, actually. So
yeah, I love that, and it's innovative. It's let's go, Sister Talia Taylor. Hi, sister. Are you there? what just happened? Hi, sister. Are you there?
no,
I'm
hi.
not sure.
Can you hear us?
Does she know that she's on?
Let's try this again.
Oh, I don't think she knows she's on. We hear you. Live town halls. I'm
So
hi,
while-
sister. Okay, while we're waiting. Go ahead, Rebecca.
Okay. One thing though that and maybe she'll try to get back on. I actually know her. She's a nice person. That in terms of Rendell's, what we learned from Rendell as mayor and the cuts there. I mean, I think that it's an interesting question to look back and see what have we learned, what could we do differently. I think one of the things that's making this balancing even harder, honestly, is the mayor agreed with the unions and gave wage increases to the union. We can talk about, but I mean, I think a wage increase of 2 or 2.5% is definitely not unreasonable at all. But if you're giving wage increases to some employees, but then you're saying you're going to need to lay others off, it creates a lot of confusion in the workforce, and then there's a lot of questions around that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I meant to bring that up earlier. It seems off message to give raises 2 weeks before you're making all these cuts. Sister Talia Taylor, how are you? Thanks for joining us. Can you hear us?
Oh no.
Yeah.
Oh, there you are. Go ahead.
Hi, Rebecca. Hello, everyone.
Hi, how are you?
Absolutely beautiful. Amazing.
What's on your mind? Go ahead. What's on your mind?
I guess he's refreshing.
Go ahead and ask your question. No?
There's a lot of good questions in here, Rebecca.
All right, I think we'll come back to sister. There's a lot of interest, Rebecca, in drop.
Okay.
When will drop be eliminated? What amount could be recouped by the city if the drop loophole is eliminated? Can you talk about? It's interesting because we just talked about the innovations brought by Ed Rendell. One of them, when he was mayor, was drop, which at the time was a way to help manage the city workforce.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that?
So drop is a difficult one, not because okay, I'll explain it because there's a few different moving pieces here. It does not serve the management purpose that it was intended to. I mean, anyone that works within the city knows that there's no planning around. It was supposed to be that someone enters drop and accrues 4 years of pension benefits at the same time that they get their salary. Then they leave and they get a lump sum payout. So it was supposed to allow for planning for long-term employees leaving. No, it doesn't work that way because it's not used that way. And there's always like someone who's in drop for 3.5 years, the last month is when the manager starts to think about it, seriously. So it doesn't work as a management tool. The thing about it is that it is subject to collective bargaining. So what the courts have found is that since it is a benefit that was given to employees, it cannot be taken away. Mayor Nutter tried to take it away. So it would need to be part of the collective bargaining process. And it is an extremely popular benefit, obviously, among city workers. So that is the holdup. And I think it's one of many things that would be looked at in labor negotiations, but it hasn't been, even though it angers everyone, understandably, because they're like, why are city employees getting these huge payouts when my taxes are going up? And I completely get it, but it is subject to union negotiation at this point.
Well, and adding to the outrage, where it was never intended to apply to elected officials, but many elected officials took advantage of it for many years.
That's right. They did, which is just wrong, in my opinion. And I even think, like, for example, electeds have their own pension plan that has more generous benefits than the workers' pension plan, which to me is just like, that's just wrong. So I actually chose to stay in the workers' plan when I became an elected, which I definitely got some questions about that from pension, because I think they wanted to make sure that I understood what I was doing. But I just said, like, from a philosophical standpoint, I cannot take advantage of this. There shouldn't be a pension plan that has richer, more generous benefits for electeds than for the workers. So anyway, but that's, the pension, there's a lot of moving pieces with the pension.
And I should say, one of the things I give Mayor Kenney credit for, as a councilman, he was a critic of drop, and he remains so today. So
I mean, I think that there have been, and I do sit on the pension board now, and there have been changes made lowering the assumed rate of return. The really generous pension plan is the 1987 plan. People that were hired before 1987, that plan is closed. That is the largest piece of the city's unfunded pension obligation. The plan now is much less generous than the other one, but there's a lot of room for things that need to change. Absolutely.
Is that a crisis that we're looking at, the unfunded pension liability? I think right now it makes up maybe 16-17% of the
That's right.
of the budget, and I gotta assume that's only going to get worse the more this depending on how Wall Street does.
I mean, it's a big challenge. It's one that that I've spent some time on, that I've had my staff look into, and it's a huge problem for the city. So it's only 45% funded, and therefore the city has to pay huge amounts into it every year. So it does take up 16-17% of the city's budget. I don't see that changing anytime soon. I think that this is decades and decades of past mayors, going back to Rizzo, et cetera, like promising workers benefits that they weren't paying for. So we're stuck with that. And there's not any magic bullet solution. You have to tackle it from different angles on a constant basis. So you have to be lowering the assumed rate of return. You have to be managing investments well. You have to sort of be looking at all of these things together all of the time. But there isn't, unfortunately, an easy solution, unless, I think Mayor Nutter wanted to, sort of sell the PGW and put the proceeds in. But with that off the table, I think there's not an easy, large amount of money to go into it.
And the lowering the rate of return presumes, which is really a way to say being honest about your projection, right? Yeah. And instead, what we do is we get political budgets that create rosy scenarios about the rate of return, right? And so it's just a problem that keeps multiplying.
Yeah, I mean, the assumed rate of return now is at 7.55%, which is still too high, a lot lower than the 9% it was, 15 years ago. Wow. But it's, what happens is every time you lower it, though, you have to pay more into it. But we had done some research and analysis showing that it should go down to 6.8. But that's, $100 million hit a year to the general fund budget. So it's being done incrementally, lowering the assumed rate of return, that is. But it's definitely a big issue.
Well, this has been great. I think we're I told you we'd keep you about an hour. It's been a little bit more.
Okay.
I really enjoy this. I think this went well. How did you enjoy it, or are you?
I did. I
you
love
rolling your eyes?
Great. It's great. I'm happy to come back if people want me back. Yeah, and I think that I will be. The budget is going to be an ongoing conversation issue, and we will be putting things out on that. So that will be sort of to be continued, I would say.
That's great. Thank you so much. And this went well enough that I'm gonna order a pizza and have a beer.
Awesome. Sounds good. Cheers to you, Larry.
All right. Thanks so much, and we'll see everyone next week.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.
Okay. Bye-bye.